So here's how I used to take notes. I have here one of my neurology PowerPoints from med school. Uh, it's about the sensory anterolateral system. And just going through, you can see it's pretty dense even from the very beginning. There's a lot of information. And it just kind of goes on and on. And the way I used to take notes is I would come down here at the bottom and take my notes here at the bottom. And after the lecture, I would open up my Anki and copy my notes over to Anki. I would go up here, for example, and copy this part over here into Anki and try to make a card out of it um, with close deletion and whatnot. And I go to the second bullet points and do the same thing. And sometimes I would add my notes from the bottom as well. So there's a couple problems with this approach for me at the time. So one problem is it takes a long time to make the cards. After lecture, it usually takes me at least an hour to make the cards. And the second problem is if I update my notes, say I put new notes down here, or if I update the PowerPoint, then I have to update my cards as well. So it's kind of like taking my notes twice. And the last problem, which I feel like is the biggest problem with using Anki by itself, is that when I'm making the cards, I'm making it from small. I'm making it from uh, detailed bullet points and tables and images. So when I go study the cards, that's what I'm studying as well. So I feel like there's a disconnect between memorizing the individual bullet points and the details and understanding the concept, the bigger picture of the PowerPoint slide. And what usually ends up happening is I'll memorize all the cards with Anki and I'll go back to the PowerPoints and then look over the PowerPoints again to try to connect all the dots and try to make sense. And I feel like that's not very optimized way of studying because a lot of times uh, the concept builds upon each other so that if I get a card from the later sections, later parts of a PowerPoint, and I haven't even understood a concept from the first few sections, the first part of the PowerPoint, it makes it really hard to memorize that card and trying to understand that card. I also didn't like the way the PowerPoint was organizing my notes. It's really easy to take notes in class and follow along with the lecture, but it's really hard to figure out what's going on um, with the concept and trying to organize my notes. I almost feel like I need to make my own outline to know where one section ends and one section begins. What I ended up using and coming up as a solution is actually a three-part solution. And the first part is note-taking strategy with Markdown and Typora as my app. And the next part is an Ankify script that I wrote that would convert my notes to cards after I take my notes. And the last part is a personal wiki, kind of my centralized database where I could add my notes to over time and it would grow. So I switched over to take notes using Markdown for a couple reasons. Markdown is basically just text with a little bit extra formatting, but it makes it really easy to organize my notes and adding different styles to my notes without having to worry about the exact color or the exact size. So to give you an example, one of the things I can do with Markdown is to break off my notes into different sections. And you can do it really easily by using the pound sign. So if you type in the pound sign followed by your title, your heading, you can make a heading here. So I'll just do cardiac anatomy here. And that automatically styles my heading so I don't have to worry about changing the size of the fonts and doing all of the styling here. So now I can go down and change this to RCA. And if you use two pound signs, it makes a smaller heading. And you can see on the left how the RCA belongs to cardiac anatomy. And I can keep going down. And once I hit the next one, which is LCA, and then the two arteries from the LCA is the LAD. So that's over here. So over here I'm going to do 3 pound sign and LAD, and then 3 pound sign and LCX. Okay, and once I hit here, that's no longer the anatomy, so I'll change to cardiac physiology. But you can see how it's really quick to just divide your note into different sections, and it's easy over here to see how the sections are organized, and you can navigate to each section really easily. It's just something you can't do in Word document or PowerPoints. And if you actually look at the source code of the note, you can see the pound signs here. And to bold a text, you just use to asterisk. And to italicize the text, you just use an underline like that. And there's other things you can do. So, for example, you can add bullet points just by using dash. And you can tab over like that. And you won't have to worry about lining up your bullet points. You can also use listed bullet points or numbered bullet points like this. You can also link to different web page just by using brackets and the text in the bracket and the URL in parentheses like that. You can also add images by adding exclamation mark, bracket, and parentheses, and you add the URL of the image. It could be online or it could be on your computer. And here's my neurology notes again, this time in Markdown format. And let me change the background so it's easier to see. So here's all my PowerPoint slides with my notes underneath each slide and in different sections. If you look over to the left, you can see I have the different sections, and here's the spinothalamic tract and the subsections, the modality, the tract, and the histology divided up into different parts, different slides. To show you how to change from PowerPoint to Markdown, what you gotta do is you gotta open up your PowerPoint. You have to go to File, Export, change file type, and then do JPEG, and save as, and then save it, and then save all slides. And so that's gonna save all of your slides into a folder. Once you've saved your slides, you have a folder in the same folder as your PowerPoint that has all the slides. And now go open up Typora, which I have over here on the right side, and select all of your slides and just drag and drop your selection into Typora. And now you have all the slides in pictures. And now you can go and add in your notes underneath each slide. The way you make Anki cards is like this. So you use curly brackets, and whatever's in the curly brackets becomes the front of the card or the question for the card. So, and whatever comes after the bracket ends becomes the back of the card. And this goes all the way until you get to another curly brackets. So then this becomes the front of card 2, and whatever follows becomes back of the card 2. to show you an example, here's my neurology notes again. And you can see right here, I have the question for my card, 3 modalities of a anterolateral system, what is used to test it, and what is spinal level. And then I have my slide after it with my notes after it. So all of these will become the back of card 1, and then that goes until I get to another curly brackets, which becomes the front of card 2, and this just keeps going on and on. So if there's a section I want to skip over, what I would usually do, for example, if I want to skip over this slide right here, it's probably not very important. I would just do ignore for that, and later on, if there's another section I want to skip over, I would do ignore for that as well. So Anki only imports the same card once. So if you have 2 cards with the same front side, it's only gonna import the second card. So when I import my entire note into Anki, there will only be 1 card with ignore on the front side, and when I get to that card, I'll know to skip over it. And this is kind of how I study section by section. When I'm making my cards, I would go from top down, and once I get to a point where I feel like I need to study all of the materials before that section, I would make an ignore card, and ignore the rest of the note. And when I export this into Anki, only have the cards before this section. And once I'm okay with my knowledge of that section, then I go back to the ignore card, and then I add the front of the card, or add the question in here again. And I would keep going until I get to another section where I feel like I need to stop. Then I would make another ignore card, and that will stop the rest of the notes from being turned into cards. And that's how I kind of study section by section, with the knowledge of each subsequent section being built upon the knowledge of the previous sections. So there's a few downsides to the way I'm making the cards using this method, and the biggest one is, since each slide is a picture, I can't go in and change what's on the picture. And also, I'm forced to ask about what is the slide about. It's a very different way of thinking with making the question. Instead of asking specifically a bullet point, I'm asking about the concept being shown on the slide, which I feel it's not necessarily a downside. It's just a different way of thinking about making the card, and I think that actually makes it better to study, because it forces me to try to explain to myself the concept on the slide. And if I really wanted to make a slide about the specific bullet point, I can actually still do that manually. Now I'm going to show you how to use the Ankify script. So after you finish with your markdown notes here, along with the pictures in the picture folder, here's the Ankify script. All you have to do is double click on it, and it's going to ask you to select folder. So just click browse, and you want to select the folder that your markdown script is in. And so I have Ankify example here, and you can have as many markdown files in there as you want, so the script will convert all of the markdown files. So select the folder and then click convert, and it's going to tell me finish converting, and click OK. And there's going to be a new folder called HTML, and when you open it, it's going to have the HTML file converted from the markdown file, and that's the file you want to go to import into Anki. So now I'm going to go to Anki, and then you go to File, Import, and then you click on the HTML file in that folder, and you want to use the basic card for front and back. You want to use whatever deck you're gonna import it to, and for the field, you want to use this symbol. I'm not sure what it is. Squiggly line, tilde. And then you want to use update existing nodes, allow HTML, and there's going to be two fields when you do that, the front and the back, and then click import. It's going to say 27 nodes imported. And we can go study those cards. So here's the front of the card in the brackets, and here's the back of the card. Notice how it's kind of ugly. It's kind of centered here, and the bullet points are over here. So you can change that. What you have to do is you have to click on Edit, Cards, and then here under Styling, that's where you put the styling you want to change all of this. So this is CSS styling. So what I'm going to do is first I'm going to change text align from center to left. And that's going to left align on my text. And next I want to add a little bit margin on both sides of the card. So I'm going to come down here and type in .win for Windows. So this is only going to affect Windows system. So if you sync the card onto your iOS or Android device, it's not going to affect that. And I'm going to type in card again, .card, and then curly bracket. And then I'm going to do width, colon, and I'm going to use 50% to take up half of the size of the page, semicolon, next line. Now I'm going to try to center the card, so I'll do margin dash left, colon, auto, and then margin dash right, colon, auto, and then bracket back. So this will center the card for me, but it's not going to center the image. So to center the image, I have to make one for image. So img colon, and then I have to do display block first, and then I have to do margin left, auto, margin right, auto, and I have to do max with 100%. None of this don't worry if it doesn't make sense, it just works. Height, auto, and then close the bracket. So that should fix it. So if I go back to my card, I have my image centered and I have my bullet points like this. I want to show you briefly my personal wiki that I have set up. So it's really just a folder I have, and within this folder I have my step 1 notes, step 2 notes, and residency notes. So my step 1 notes are divided into module systems or organ systems, and each one of them is really just a collection of markdown files and notes I've taken. And my step 2 notes are organized by rotations that I've done. And my residency notes are organized so far by topics that I've learned. And this is on my computer, but I also have this synced up to online to a website. And here it is. And you can see over here that I have the same, it's the same thing. It's just automatically generated. Here's my step 1 notes, step 2 notes, and residency notes. And here's the same under cardiology, cardiac anatomy. And have the same notes I have on my computer is also synced up to online. And so this is really convenient because I can go to any computer and be able to access my notes. I can search for specific topics. I can use this on my phone on rounds. So it's just a centralized location for all of my knowledge. And sometimes it's really easy. So it's really easy to find something because I know exactly where in my notes something is. And oftentimes it's hard to do that when you want to find something on UpToDate really quick. And UpToDate can be pretty confusing sometimes. So this is pretty hard to set up, takes a lot of effort. Uh, I will probably make a video on this sometimes in the future once I figure out how to explain it better. A couple more random things I want to show you. So one of the things I ended up doing for a lot of my images, I started having to uploading the images. So for example, here's my cardiology notes. And you notice I've uploaded that and then linked it to an online URL instead of having it keeping it on my computer. So I found that as I started having more and more images on my computer, the folder just gets really, really big, and at one point it's just not sustainable to have that uh, on my computer and synced up online. So I kind of had to separate my text files away from the images, and that's the beauty of Markdown files. Since they're just really text, you can um, you can have the external files hosted elsewhere. So and that makes it easier to have things at different places. You can also see that I've been experimenting with different ways of making the questions right here. I'm making it as a link, and this the two dots. So that's when I was trying to experiment front and optional backside card. So if it's two dots, then it's making a front card, but if it's a dot and a comma, then it makes a reverse card. Um, and show you one of my my step 2 notes. For example, my dementia movement disorder. You can see all of the dementias on the left side. And one of the caveats of the script that I wrote is that the first thing that you need in your note has to be a card. So I'm going to ignore card here. It has to be a card. If you just have notes besides the headings, so the script will ignore the headings. But if you just have text as first thing in the morning, it's not gonna import the cards correctly. So I make a card first, and you can see I was experimenting with different ways of making the question as well. So this is HTML comment. So this is great because when I sync this up to my wiki online, this part will go away. This part will be hidden. So it makes the rest of the notes flow really nicely. The downside is that it's kind of hard to type the format of it. It's a little bit weird the way they do that. Um, so and then you can see I have one ignore card up here and then another one down here. So it'll ignore all of these as well. And for my residency, I also started adding just random worksheets that pharmacists have that can be really helpful and just have everything in one place. So I have a good reference and I know where to go. So overall, I feel like this way of taking notes and making cards is a much better way compared to what I was doing before with PowerPoints. I can take notes like I normally would, but at the same time, I have an outline over here, and that makes it easier to navigate the different section of the notes and makes it easier to keep track the big concept behind the big concept in the note. And at the same time, I'm making my cards using the slides and using my notes as the back of the card. So I don't have to type in the card again. I don't have to make the cards again. So that saves a lot of time. And if I go change my notes, if I'm adding a new bullet point here, I can just export my notes again and import into Anki, and it'll update the cards for me. So it makes it really streamlined approach uh, to making cards and taking notes. And lastly, I have my centralized wiki, which is just my notes in a folder. So I feel like everything is kind of connected now compared to before. It's still not perfect. It's not a seamless experience. There's a lot of clickings I have to do. There's a lot of um, formatting I have to do to make the cards. But I feel like the amount of time I'm saving using this method and the way I'm studying now from a big concept to small concept is so much better than trying to memorize the cards, which I was doing, or trying to memorize details first, which I was doing before.